Welcome to The Advocator. I'm your host, Carl Shallahorn. The mission of The Advocator is to educate and bring awareness of both local and global issues that affect the Western New York area and communities worldwide. Today's topic is mental health, crisis or opportunity. And my guest is Ken Hausneck, who is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Erie County. So join us for The Advocator right after these messages.
How's it going? Oh, it's a letter for Nick. Maybe she wants us to give it to her. Nick, read it, read it. Read it, 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 read it.
Hey, I think you dropped this.
Welcome back to The Advocator. I'm Carl Shallahorn. Joining me today is Ken Hausneck. Ken is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Erie County. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Carl, glad to be here.
You know, Ken, when people think of terms like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, they also hear names like Virginia Tech, Aurora. People get very afraid and scared, and they don't know exactly how to handle these type of situations. How does the MHA provide services for individuals in the Western New York area, and what's the mission of the MHA?
Well, start with the fact that we're the Mental Health Association, and most people are mentally healthy most of the time. So the mission of the organization is we promote mental health and advocate on behalf of preserving and protecting mental health, because it's fragile and there are a lot of things that can affect that, and there are some groups that are very at risk, and we'll be able to talk about that a little bit. And then we've got a range of programs and services for folks and their family members and friends who have suffered a temporary or a more permanent loss of mental health and wellness.
Right.
Got 5 main program areas, Carl. One is basic emotional skills training, where we work with young children, pre-K through grade 2, and we teach these kids basic emotional skills. You get angry, it's an appropriate way to express anger in an inappropriate way.
Right.
You have a disagreement, there's a good way to disagree, there's a bad way to disagree.
Exactly.
You have to work in a group.
Sure.
There's a good way to assert your opinion, there's a bad way to assert your opinion. Real basic stuff, but those are the foundational skills that you need to be emotionally healthy as you go through your life.
Right.
So that's a terrific program. We've been doing that for more than 35 years. We've worked with literally tens of thousands of children throughout Western New York, and we'd like to work with more. So that's one program that we've got. Another program we've got is legal services and advocacy. We are the only organization in Western New York that does pro bono legal services exclusively focused on individuals who have got a mental health diagnosis. 2 full-time attorneys, 2 full-time paralegals. A lot of times when people are going through a mental health crisis, they and their family, it becomes very, very complicated. They need help navigating their way through the system to get the benefits that they're due, and that's what our folks do, is help them. And we work anywhere between 400 and 500 individual cases each year.
Wow, that's
So
a lot.
the second area that we help a lot of folks with. Third area that we've got is information and referral. We're not a direct service provider. A lot of people hear mental health association, they call, they come to the door, they access it through the internet, and they're looking for counseling.
Right.
We're not a counseling facility. We are a information and referral source for them. So you're calling on behalf of yourself, calling for a family member, calling for a friend, coworker, whatever, and you need a referral on a professional, you need a referral on some support groups with just like more information.
Sure.
We've got a pretty extensive database and a capability to help with that. So that's the third program area. Fourth program area is child and family support. So your child, whether it's a very young child, an adolescent, or a young adult, is suddenly having a mental health crisis, and you find yourself in the middle of a situation that you just have absolutely no idea what to do, where to go, who to turn to, where to get help. And that's a very active area for us. We've got family advocates that are in the ECMC.
Right.
We've got a family advocate that's in Bry-Lynn. We're in conversations with other organizations throughout the community, and we help families in a time of need.
Sure.
And then the fifth and final area is a program called Court-Appointed Special Advocates. And that's a tremendous program. They're all great programs,
Right.
but that's an amazing program where what we do is we work with children that are in the family court system,
Right.
kids who have experienced abuse and neglect. There are 1,000 of these children in Erie County.
Oh my.
And our staff people, and we've got 2 full-time staff people there, recruit, screen, train, and work with volunteers who have one mission in life. Advocate on behalf of that child so that that child ends up in a permanent, stable, secure home so they can blossom and achieve their full potential.
And of course, for many of these children, they haven't had any stability in their lives. They haven't had that one constant person, that one consistent individual who's been there for them. And, you know, I can understand certainly how the CASA program can benefit them. How do you see the CASA program working for some of these kids in terms of their mental health and their future?
Yeah, well, as you would imagine, if you're a young person and you've been in a succession of unstable living accommodations, and you have been abused in some of the most terrible ways that you could imagine.
Right.
If you've been neglected, which in some cases is almost as bad or maybe even worse than abuse, and you don't have anybody who's believing in you and giving you hope, you are much more prone to have a lot of emotional and behavioral disorders.
Right.
And it just makes sense.
Right.
So if you can take a young person like that and put them in a place that's secure, in a place that's loving, you know, with a family that cares about them and supports them and nurtures them and helps them discover and to develop the abilities that they've got, they just blossom.
Right.
And it's not just a case of bad things not happening, then good things
Sure.
have an opportunity to start happening.
Right. So I guess what we're talking about is early intervention. Because basically, when we have children that are in these situations, there may be times when they may not have that support like you described, and they may end up in the criminal justice system, for instance.
Yeah, well, early intervention is key. You know, just like with physical health, the earlier that you address something that's not right, the greater the likelihood that you're going to have a favorable outcome, the easier the treatment will be, and the more rapid it will progress,
Right.
and the less costly it will be.
Right.
Same thing with behavioral and emotional health. But here's the bad part. Although almost every mental illness now is treatable,
Right.
and the treatments have made tremendous advances over the last 15 or 20 years. Even though almost all of the illnesses are treatable, 80% of people don't get treatment.
Right.
And those who get treatment
Right.
often wait a very long time between the initial diagnosis of the illness and getting the treatment. And so one small manageable problem becomes 1, 2, or 3 larger, harder to manage problems. And that has consequences for that person, for everybody who loves that person, and for the community at large, because it's a lot more expensive.
Right. So when you think about it, you know, there's a statistic that is just staggering, that 1 in 4 Americans lives with a diagnosable mental illness. And of course, when you think about it, we're not always talking about folks with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. There's many other types of mental illnesses as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk more about this topic and continue this discussion after these messages on The Advocator.
Different words describe different people. But in the eyes of the law, there's one that fits us all. Human right number 7. We're all equal before the law. What are human rights? Find out at youthforhumanrights.org.
Welcome back to The Advocator. I'm Carl Shallahorn. I'm joined here by Ken Hausneck. Ken is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Erie County. You know, Ken, we were just talking about various services that the MHA provides, as well as I touched a little bit about the number of people in this country that deal with mental illnesses. Let's talk some more about other at-risk populations. For instance, let's talk about our veterans for a minute. You know, our veterans are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They're dealing not only with physical health issues, they have, of course, traumatic brain injury, which is a physical health issue, which manifests in many ways with mental and emotional difficulties. We also have veterans coming back with emotional trauma, mental trauma because of what they've been through. What do you see as services that could benefit our veterans to help them integrate back into the community?
Yeah, well, you're right, Carl. I mean, we've asked a lot of our military between the deployments to Iraq and the deployments to Afghanistan. A lot of these young soldiers have been deployed into active combat situations 4, 5, 6 times. And they're coming back with a host of challenges that affect not just them,
Right.
but their entire family.
Right.
And sometimes a lot of folks think that just the deployment is the hardest part. Sometimes the reintegration is just as hard or even harder, because imagine if you're a child of a active duty military and your mom or your dad has been gone for a large block of time during this pivotal period in your growing up. And so you've got some issues that you've got to work with as a young person.
Right.
You know, Dad missed all my baseball games.
Right.
You know, Mom missed my dance recitals.
Right.
They weren't there for my birthday or for
Right.
Christmas.
Right.
You know, and so I've sort of emotionally protected myself by putting a barrier up, and I'm not really ready to let them back into my life. So I think we as a community, and not just here in Western New York, but as a nation, realize that we've asked a lot of our military, and we have a solemn responsibility to give them resources. Quite honestly, we haven't done a very good job.
Right.
But I think we're starting to do a better job.
Right.
Here in Western New York, in addition to the VA and a lot of the other services that we've had, we've got a new program called the Veteran One-Stop Center.
Right.
On Main Street in the city of Buffalo, and the basic idea there is a veteran could go to a single location and find help for every need that they would have. Is it for job training? Is it for family support? Is it for just a place where they can go and work on resumes and have an office where they could stage a job search? Support groups that might meet for them
Sure.
and their family?
Sure.
Financial counseling, whatever their needs might be.
Right.
You know, and that's a really good approach for us to have. It's a good beginning. We need to do more.
Sure. And, you know, when you think about it, as you said, our veterans have really given so much, and they are receiving services. I recently saw something on 60 Minutes a few weeks ago. There's a new type of treatment called prolonged exposure therapy, where essentially the veterans relive their experience through treatment, and they're able to work through some of these experiences so that they can, you know, lead. I don't want to use the word normal because it never will be normal, I don't think, but they can integrate and feel better about where they're at and do better, you know, here at home. Also, let's talk also about another population that deals with mental health issues, and that's our college students. Of course, you know, typically, from what I understand, the age of onset for many people is that 18 to 25 window, and between those ages, many young people deal with situations like drug abuse, which end up maybe triggering mental health problems. How do you see our college students, and what do you see that's being done for them?
You're right, Carl. The college population is college-age young adults are facing a difficult time right now, and we're not doing a very good job as a community giving them the support that they need. 50% of all mental illness manifests before the time somebody's 14, 75% before the time somebody's 21. So, as you said, between 18 and 25, that's when a lot of chronic behavioral challenges first begin to emerge in somebody's life. Do we have the resources on college campuses to give those students the level of support so that we can work with them early, so that we can work with them accurately, so that we can work with them comprehensively. We don't. You know, are the colleges doing a good job? Are they making an effort? Are they doing everything in their power to help? I believe many of them are.
Right.
But I think what we need to do as a community is we need to complement what the individual schools are doing with some more community-based resources.
Right.
For instance, we know that if somebody with a mental health issue leaves the security, the stability, all of the support structure that they've got at home and goes away to college, that's a very at-risk student.
Right.
Are we providing that at-risk student with all of the support and all of the resources that they need to minimize the risk that they're not going to be successful at the beginning of their college career? And if you're a young freshman college student and you experience a couple of failures early on, that can mark you and can change the trajectory of your life in a very bad way early on.
Absolutely. In fact, there was a story that kind of dovetails into another topic that is really problematic, and that is our prison system. Of course, like you said, many individuals have these experiences early in their lives, that 18 to 25 window. Of course, what happens is for some, they end up getting involved with the criminal justice system by creating or being involved in crimes that allow them or that get them into situations with the law where they are imprisoned. And for many respects, our prisons are becoming, in some ways, the new mental institutions. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a tragedy. I mean, it's a tragedy on a human level, and it's a tragedy for our society, and it's a grave mistake for us from a financial standpoint as taxpayers. In New York State now, we've got more people with mental health disorders in prison than we've got in mental health facilities.
Right.
Obviously, mental health facilities are designed to help people who are dealing with a mental health issue to get to a place of recovery and to be able to resume some level of stability in their lives.
I want you to hold that thought, Ken. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the prison system and mental health. We're also going to talk about stigma and other things. So please join us as we continue with The Advocator right after these messages.
Where would I go if the world had no limits? If I could defy all boundaries? If I could ride the wind? Where would it take me? If all roads were open to me, where would I go? If I could fly, if I were free to move.
And we're back with The Advocator. I'm Carl Shallahorn. I'm joined by Ken Hausneck. Ken is the Executive Director of the Mental Health Association of Erie County. Ken, we were just talking about the mental institutions that have become more like prison settings for many individuals. A lot of this came from the deinstitutionalization effort that came about in the 1960s. How do you see this deinstitutionalization? Is it helping or hurting our communities in terms of treating those with mental illness?
Yes.
Both, right?
Yeah, it's doing both.
Right.
The motive was a good motive. I mean, the motive was let people be in the community, let folks feel more normal. Let's push the treatment and the process of recovery closer to where people live. That's a great motive, and that still needs to be honored and recognized. But in smaller communities, in rural communities, the ability to gather together the resources that are necessary
You said, I just stop right there. You said resources. We're talking about money, right? Basically, money is unfortunately the driver of this whole movement. And I think you and I both know that, for instance, in New York State, we're experiencing, I think it's called Medicaid redesign, where they're basically reappropriating funds for funding for mental health and other services. Many people fall through the cracks, and they aren't getting treatment, or they're being underserved. So essentially, is the system broken? Are we dealing with something that we aren't going to be able to overcome, or is this something that is just going to be more of a challenge or an opportunity, like I described the topic of our show as being?
Well, the system is broken, clearly. I mean, when you've got more people dealing with a persistent, severe mental illness in prison than in facilities that are designed to help those people, the system's broken. The inpatient system is broken. The outpatient system is broken. If our young people, if our college students, if people in the workplace, if our veterans, if our seniors, if every group in our community isn't getting the support that they need to understand what constitutes being mentally healthy, to preserve that, to protect that, and to recover if they've had a loss of mental health, then we need to do things differently.
So in terms of doing things differently, let's touch briefly on the media. Now, of course, this is a TV show. We're talking about mental health. Hopefully, we're providing a balanced perspective on mental health. But oftentimes, we hear about things in the news that don't often paint a very good picture, rather, of mental health, of mental illness, and we find out necessarily the dark side. Is it a blessing or a curse when we talk about the media in terms of social media or traditional media?
Well, I think both social media and the traditional media, it's hard to give a carte blanche answer. Some do a good job addressing the issue of mental health, others a not so good job. But the one thing that's for sure is that the conversation, the level of awareness is higher now than it's ever been. Because I think many people are recognizing that what we've got right now is a crisis.
Right.
And I don't think it's an exaggeration to call it a crisis.
Right.
When 1 in 4 people have got a mental illness, when it affects every part of our society, when there's a human cost, when there's an economic cost, and it's not getting better, and it's getting worse, and it's affecting our children, and it's affecting our young adults, and it's affecting our future, then we, as a society, have to respond in a different way.
Sure.
We have to do something different.
And of course, one of the things that's unfortunate is, and this has been around since basically the dawn of civilization, that's the idea of stigma, like I think I mentioned previously. When we have this idea that, mentally ill are violent, they are unpredictable, that's what society as a general believes. That's what we hear the messages of. But what I think is the truth is that most people living with a mental illness are more victims of crime. They're more vulnerable, and as opposed to the general population. Why do we get these messages, and what can we do about that?
We get those messages because a lot of times the conversation about mental health centers around a terrible episode like the Sandy Hook shootings, or Columbine, or Virginia Tech,
right.
Or these terrible, terrible situations, and those are the exceptions. It's exactly as you described. People with a mental illness are 12 times more likely to be victims of crime rather than perpetrators of crime. But we don't talk about the times when they're victims of crime.
Right.
We talk about those rare, horrific incidents when they're the perpetrators of crime.
Right.
That's not all bad, because it does bring some conversation to the issue of mental health, and it does bring some conversation to the awareness that what we've got right now is a system that's not working, that's failing a lot of our most vulnerable people, and it's hurting all of us, and it doesn't take something terrible like a school shooting for it to hurt us. When a young college student doesn't get the help that they need at the beginning of their college career, and they can't fulfill their God-given purpose and destiny, that hurts all of us.
So what can someone do, for instance, if they have a friend or a loved one who may be displaying some kind of symptoms, or they may be, for instance, living with concerns that they may have for their loved one, what can they do to help them? How do they reach out?
Well, number one, start to educate yourself on what constitutes emotional, behavioral, mental health. Understand when it's healthy and when it's not healthy. If you're experiencing something that is outside the healthy range, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, then be aware of the resources that are available to get that person help.
Mm-hmm.
And don't perpetuate stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Don't contribute to that.
Right.
This person is experiencing some upset in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and we all experience
Right.
it at different points. Some
Right.
have a physical upset, some have a financial upset, some have a mental health issue that they deal with. It's part of being a human being.
Sure.
And so we support each other.
Sure.
We encourage each other. We stand together. We're better together than we are separately.
Right. And when you describe it that way, it makes sense. It makes sense that if we come together as a community, as we take on that personal responsibility of reaching out to our loved ones, of not ostracizing them, of not pushing them aside, we will be able to help others. And I think really in the end, Ken, each one reach one, like the old saying goes. If we're able to help just one person ourselves, that will definitely help, probably more people than we even can imagine.
Yeah.
So that's a very good idea, and that's a very good method to follow to help those in need. So basically, what we're talking about here, we've talked about a number of different topics, a number of different things revolving around mental health. How can people get involved with the Mental Health Association? How can they contribute, or how can they donate their time or volunteer for the MHA?
Well, you can reach us by phone, and it's area code 716-886-1242. Or you can go on the web. It's Erie, ERIEMHA.org. Or you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, all the different social media.
Right.
Because we're the Mental Health Association of Erie County.
Right.
And if we're going to reach the young people in Erie County, you go where they are, and they're on social media.
Well, Ken, I want to thank you for joining us today. Your insight is very enlightening, and I believe that hopefully our viewers have learned something, the more balanced side, like I said, of mental health and what we're learning from many resources like the MHA. So I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to contact us at The Advocator, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So have a good day, and remember, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Have a great day.